Uh, Dan has rang the bell, so Dan's going to have to ring the bell one more time to get everybody to kind of get together and sit here. Appreciate all of the talking. Hopefully we'll continue that discussion as we start talking about this topic, because I think this particular topic is going to require a lot of feedback. But good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to this new quarter of Bible class that we're kind of starting up this morning. For the next month and a half, Doug and I will try to attempt to take you through a Bible class that's entitled Christians in the Workplace. And you might be kind of asking yourself, well, why would we want to make a class about this particular topic? And for me, it really didn't kind of hit home until I kind of associated with this verse, Matthew 10, verse 16. And it says, Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And so, when I kind of typically hear that verse, my first thought about how it kind of relates to me is usually in the context of me going out and just being a Christian. I am this sheep kind of going out into the world that is full of wolves that are trying to eat me up and trying to keep me from being a Christian. However, if you were to read the beginning of chapter 10, starting in verse 1, you get all this additional context within the Bible where Jesus is, kind of help you understand why Jesus is even really saying this to begin with. And this is actually where Jesus is actually sending out his apostles, his disciples, to say, go out and spread the good news. And in the process of him doing that, he's trying to warn them, give them ideas of what to watch out for. And so now if I were to think about that verse in the context of trying to spread the gospel and what I need to do in order to share God's word, I typically kind of envision that as some kind of effort organized by the church. And I would think of Bible studies, inviting people to church, offering us to study up with them, or being a welcome smile to visitors as they come in. Any sort of evangelistic effort. And it kind of made sense to me. It's like, well, if we're going to be Christians, we need to be the best Christians that we're going to be, because it's all related to church. And I would always kind of envision that whenever I would think about this particular verse. But is our church life really the only place that we have an opportunity to spread the gospel? Is the only way to represent Christ and to spread this idea of the gospel only possible when we have a Bible in our hand or when we're in this building? No, I don't think so. I think there's opportunities everywhere that we go. There's wolves everywhere, and when we as Christians are not, and we as Christians are not only Christians when we are together, we are not just Christians when we are in this building, we should be Christians in every minute of our lives when we're here on this earth, right? We must be on the lookout for wolves, not just in this church, but in every aspect of our lives. And I think sometimes we create these borders that kind of separate our lives, our Christian lives, from other areas of our lives, just because we don't have a Bible in our hand, right? Or maybe that we're just not here together, we're not singing together, and so we have this separation. But we can be sheep amongst wolves in any aspect of our lives. What about our family life? Can we be sheep amongst wolves in our family? Are there instances where we're the only Christians within our extended family, and we're trying to represent a Christian life to our family? Have you ever run into that situation? I tried to think of an example that maybe I've personally experienced, and there's instances where I try to always, pray before I eat. Jesus did that. He said, broke the bread, blessed it, gave it thanks. I always try to do that. And sometimes when we're out with extended family, they're not ones to always practice that. And sometimes you get the feeling, it's like, well, maybe should I make everybody do that with me? And that little compromise, that little question of like, well, should I do it or should I just take the time and say it to myself? In some instances, we get this feeling that, oh, well, I've done right, I've done good, I've done what I've done because I'm saying it to myself, but are we really doing what God wants us to do, to be that example, to try to spread the gospel? And it's not by us just praying every time that we sit down, but are we trying to be that example to those that are possibly looking for Christ? I just kind of thought about that. I don't know if that kind of stirred up any thoughts within you guys, but I'll give you all a second to maybe comment if you want. But we're amongst wolves even within our own family. What about our social lives? Are we sheep amongst wolves when we're out and about with people that at school or with our neighbors or with our friends? Are we sheep amongst wolves with that area of or that pillar of our lives? Can you think of an example of that? Are we trying to be so politically correct about everything because we live in such, especially us, we live in such a diverse community in Sugar Land that we want to be so politically correct that we don't want to say anything about our beliefs, or we don't want to offend anybody about what possibly they believe, and so we don't say anything at all, right? Or at least that's, maybe you guys are better at it than me, but I sometimes feel that way. What about our personal life? Or can we be sheep amongst wolves within our personal life? I think when we're not around each other, or when we're out and about and out in the city, or maybe we're traveling out by ourselves, I think it's sometimes difficult because we're not around you guys. You can ask your kids, like, what are our kids doing when they're not around us? Maybe you're young enough to remember whenever you were a kid, and were you always willing to do these things in front of your parents that, maybe you did when they weren't around? Who are the wolves when we are by ourselves? I think sometimes it's us, it's our minds, it can be us, ourselves, right? What about our work life? Can we be sheep amongst wolves in our work life? I think we definitely can be. And I almost kind of think sometimes we ignore, or at least try to ignore, some of these things because it's work. It's a place where we need to be successful. And so it's easy for us to convince ourselves that we need to compromise some things within our beliefs. We need to compromise so that we can be successful, so that we can fit in, so that we can so we can provide for our family and do all of these things. And sometimes, it's just inadvertently what we do, I think. I think we sometimes section these pillars of our lives into different areas, and a lot of times some of these sections, they actually do touch our church life, our personal life, our family life. They can touch our lives, and they can feel like they actually should be there, but then you have these other ones that are kind of off and to the left or to the right, which you don't think that they should be connected at all with our Christian lives. But what I think we need to recognize, I think, actually I wanted to make this point, that sometimes we even begin our lives, we recognize it's like, oh, all of this should be connected. All of this should be connected to us as Christians, to our Christian church, to our church family. And we start out that way with this idea that it all should be touching, but what ends up happening is sometimes we just inadvertently begin to make these things go further and further out, to where we begin to compromise so much in what we're doing when we're with our social friends. We compromise so much with what we're doing with our work friends, even sometimes with our immediate family, that we compromise. We compromise because we're challenged. We're challenged with what we believe. People question. Maybe they don't question it, but they say, oh, well, we're going to get together on Sunday morning, and all the family's going to be there. We're going to have brunch. Why don't y'all come over? It's like, well, we go to church. It's like, oh, just come on, can't you go to church later? And then we compromise these little pieces, and eventually we get so compromised that it becomes habit, maybe. But it becomes part of, it makes it easier and easier for us to want to compromise, and next thing you know, we don't even recognize that we're Christian, right? And so one thing that we need to kind of recognize is that all of these things, all of these parts of our lives really have one thing in common. One thing that kind of binds them all together, and that's you. You are the binding that brings all of these things together. And you are the one that kind of represents that Christian life, that Christian authority within all of these things. It's not the church that brings it together. It's not the social life. It's not the family, personal. It's you bringing it all together. Jordan, did you?
I was thinking while you were talking about this, one of the things, I don't know if this is new or what, please enlighten me, I guess, but it seems to me that more and more now that our identity is wrapped up in our profession or, to your point, whatever political party we associate with and whatnot. It seems to be that seems to be more resonating now, maybe more than ever. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But instead of being, hey, my identity is through Jesus and a Christian, all these other things are, lower tiers. Mm-hmm. My identity now is, well, hey, you're a financial advisor. That's your, you're a CPA. You're a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that makes it maybe especially challenging because I think that's the way other people possibly see us or see me or see, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because when I come to meet you, Jordan, hey, so what do? You don't say I'm a Christian, right? You say I'm a financial advisor. And all of a sudden it goes into these conversations of that being your identity.
You're not the Lone Ranger. It's not your generation that has dealt with that. At least as long as I was in the workplace. And Brian or whoever, that particular dichotomy has always been there. And it's just trying to figure out how to deal with it that makes it difficult. But as far as the problem itself, problem's always been there. It's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, for sure. Ian?
Yeah, I would build on top of both those comments and say I think it's been that way, as Mike said, for a long time because it is very difficult to identify in this world, and it always has been difficult to identify as a Christian first. Even since the beginning of the church, Christians were being persecuted and killed. I can imagine it would be very difficult to publicly identify as a Christian then. And we don't even have to deal with that. We have all these other kind of more spiritual bad, not like physical harm, but spiritual harm that's being done to us that we should be more concerned with. I think especially in the workplace where we do, especially as men, have very strong identities. We tie ourselves to our career because that's how we provide for our family. And, we're called spiritually to be able to do that. So there's a part of our identity that is associated with what we do as a career, but I think we always have to just remember that we're Christians first, and husbands or fathers or brothers and sisters in Christ. Second, being a Christian is always first. Our relationship with God is always most important. If I can just give an example, I work side by side with a gay man, and when the rollback on abortion happened, he was really upset that day, and I approached him and said, "Hey, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? What's going on?" And he was concerned that that would have a trickle-down effect on his life. He's getting ready to be married to another man later next year, and he was concerned that those sort of rights would be taken away and rolled back. And as a Christian, you can imagine what I'm like, how do you respond to that? Can I still empathize? Can I still be kind? Can I be loving like I should be as a Christian, but still uphold my values? And it was very, very, very difficult for me to start talking about my values in that moment, but I still found a way barely to navigate and tell him where I stood, but that I still cared about him and, not necessarily empathize, but that I can feel his pain and his struggle, but that I still wanted to be able to be there, but made it clear I'm a Christian, and here's where I stand. So it's very difficult to represent Christianity in every area of your life. So anyway, that was a side note. I'm just excited about what this class can do, and it's tough.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments, John?
Oh, go ahead.
Because it takes so much of your time.
Yeah.
I mean, you spend a third or more of your life of every day and week traditionally anyway.
You'll see a slide here that kind of talks about that
Right.
exact thing. You're right. It's the majority of our life. Yeah. John,
All right, I'll go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, I think in our eyes, it's kind of a harsh reality to face this, because all we see is the persecution, and Jesus talks about this in the Sermon on the Mount, and he says there are outcomes to being godly. There are outcomes to being, and one of those outcomes he talks about in verse 10. It said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And verse 11 is always kind of a tough, or verse 12, it says, "Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is in heaven." He's saying rejoice when you're persecuted. And he's trying to shift our focus on, there is a harsh worldly reality, but when you have your eyes fixed on heaven, it's a wonderful reality.
Yeah.
So in the book of Hebrews talks about how he thought nothing of his persecution. You know, he thought nothing of the shame that he went through. So because his eyes were fixed on heaven. So it's a great topic, because there is that conflict. There is that reality we have to face. But Jesus wants us to face it head on.
Yeah.
He said, in his Sermon on the Mount,
Yeah.
these are the qualities you have to show.
Yeah. Yeah, you pretty much, as I kind of read through all the material that Daniel gave us, I mean, that's really, I think a lot of the focus is just shifting our mindset and how we're viewing things here. So, yeah, thank you. Brian? Doesn't sound
Yeah, I guess I'm very interested in seeing where you're going to go with this class, but if I were to distill it down in my mind, as a Christian in the workplace, the question becomes, how can I be a positive influence upon other people's lives that they might become a Christian if they're not? And then the other side of it is, how do I keep them from influencing me? And there's the bigger challenge. How do you keep yourself from getting caught up in the ribald jokes, or you're on the road and people are doing things they shouldn't do and want you to do it with them.
Yeah.
And you get that peer pressure. So you've got those two things. How can I be a positive influence and not offend or push people away? And there's ways that you can be over the top and offend, I don't know if I'd say offend, but turn them off to God. And again, how do you keep yourself from them being, let me say it again, how do you keep yourself from being influenced by them?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, for the next 6 weeks, we're going to really be focusing in on this idea of Christians in the workplace, this one pillar of our lives, although as we've kind of commented, it's all of these pillars, all of these things within our lives, because when you're a Christian, it's not just when you're a Christian at work, but there are challenges, as Brian kind of stated, to figure out how we can be Christians and how we can change our mindset, like John said, to recognize that when we're going to work, yeah, we're thinking about those projects and those things that we've got to do, but how are these actions and how we are implementing these things and how we're interacting and how we're doing these things, how does that represent Christ to lead people to the gospel? It's just through our actions and how we interact. Harrison, did you?
You're a Christian, but that helps you teach others to do the right sorts of things, or
So the question is, how do we define what the pillars of our lives are?
what is the pillar of your life? What keeps your life and your relationships sound and solid? Do you do it in the framework of being a Christian? How do you teach other people how to do that, and how do you talk to other people about that?
Well, hopefully we'll figure that out at least a portion of it in this class of how we do all this. But, you know, these pillars of our lives, I think it's just really a name to kind of give us, you know, ideas of different scenarios of our lives that we're kind of dealing with. You know, it's not, they're all supposed to be, in general, our life. That's us, and you can section them out into different categories, and that's the pillar in that sense. But the way that we manage those things is to always have this idea that we are Christians first. And regardless of whether we're personal, workplace, you know, at the church, we're Christian first. And so hopefully that will decide or give us a path to how we act, how we react, how we do everything, how we think through all of those different scenarios in our lives. So. But, yes?
Maybe one thing that'll help Harrison out or others is that I think what I'm hearing him say is that we've got to establish the foundation. What is the foundation of our lives?
Mm-hmm.
And like everything else, pillars are built upon a foundation. They just don't stand out there on their own.
Yeah.
And so that kind of ties into more, I think what he's asking is that if you've got a proper foundation, then you can have the separate pillars, but they're still built on that foundation. And I'm sure that's what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So 6 weeks, Christians in the workplace, we'll kind of focus in on that. And really I wanted to make a comment before I think I go to this next slide, that this class, I think, is really going to be successful if we're actually kind of already doing it. I'm kind of happy that a lot of people are commenting, but sharing your experiences. There's a wide range. Doug had a great idea of bringing all the young people in here. We got a wide range of people that are in here that kind of have varying, I guess, times in their lives of being in the workplace. Some are retired, some are, starting for the first time, some are even students. And so for this class, I think, to be, successful, because we have great knowledge here, great wisdom from everyone. And so I hope that you guys are willing to share. But in an effort to do that, I'm going to try this. This is an experiment. So everybody get out your phones. And I want you to take a picture of this, or you can just go to slido.com if you want. I know everybody has a phone. And I know you don't like to take it out whenever you're in church, but just go along with me for 1 second. And if you take it may not work, but it's working for mine. So you just click on that thing and it'll take you to a website that will allow you to make comments or to post. Hopefully
If you just hover your camera app over it long enough, it should pop up a link for you to click.
or you can go to
Not
slido.com and you'll actually have to put that number in there, but I don't know if the Bel Air Wi-Fi will be able to handle all of us going to the Wi-Fi at once. If that's not the case, just turn off your Wi-Fi and just use your cell service, and that'll do the same thing. But here's the first question. Tell us where you are in your career. College student, just starting my career, working, retired, or are you just tired? And if you are on there, you can actually see people voting. I'll vote as well. And I'll give you guys a minute. Looks like we've got 32 people. Looks like you guys are doing good. I was kind of worried that nobody would like to do this, but looks like everybody's working. Yeah. You didn't bring your phone out?
I did. I took a picture, but
So it looks like the majority here right now is we're kind of right in the middle of work. I think that's where I am. I'm probably at the peak of my career, maybe. Maybe. I thought I was getting ready to retire, but then Elijah decided to come hang out with us. So another 18 years, I guess. But anyways, as you can tell, back to my comment about just the diversity, I think, and we have college students, we got somebody that's just tired, just starting my career, and so we have all of these perceptions of your career, the workplace. A lot of people have a lot of experience of being in these positions, in these scenarios of possibly spreading the gospel, of possibly running into issues with people challenging your faith and making you question whether or not you should be doing something. And so hopefully people are willing to share these experiences and share how they dealt with them, how they failed at them, how they probably maybe could have done something different. And the college students, as they're in here, hopefully they'll see warnings and recognize, oh, okay, well, this will be something that maybe I need to look either forward to or maybe warn myself to look out for as I look for a career. So here's the next question. Why do you think it's important to study how we as Christians act in the workplace? And this is free text. I think as you answer, things will start popping up here, I think. We'll see what happens. I haven't really tested this out, but salvation. What do you think it's important to study how we as Christians act in the workplace? Salvation, right? We want to not only recognize that we are saved ourselves, but there's people out there that maybe are looking for salvation. We need to live our lives holistically. That's right. As we've kind of talked about earlier, 1/3 of our lives is at work to help others with issues they're facing, godly examples, lights of the world, to allow the light influence, bring people to Christ, Great Commission, go out and spread the God's word, to be positive influences, to lead by example, influence others. People observe how we act, and we're going to kind of get into all of these things about people seeing us and, you know, recognizing, hey, that's a Christian. I know he's a Christian because he kind of told me one time he went to church. Look how he's acting. Look how he's treating me. He's my manager, you know. John Moon decided he wasn't anonymous. Fulfill God's expectations for us to work. Yes, and we'll definitely get into that. We'll see all the topics here in a minute. You know, what are God's expectations about how we should work, right? Love God, love your neighbor, and help others to know God. Everything we do influences somebody. And parents know that for sure because our kids watch us all the time and they mimic us. I was telling Kristen and Hayden yesterday that it's kind of embarrassing actually. I don't even know why I started saying this, but I was doing the centipede or the worm. I don't know if y'all know what that is. It's a breakdance move. And I was showing the girls how to do it, and then Elijah saw me, and he started getting down, and he's trying to do the worm himself. It was just, they imitate us. We influence people in our actions and stuff. It's a terrible example, but you know, when we're at work, I think our actions kind of do that. But thank you for participating. I think it's a good way for us to not have to all raise our hands, but still have things to kind of talk about. So maybe I'll try to do some more of this later on. But to Felicity's point earlier, you know, how are we interacting with work and by how much? This is fuzzy math. Probably you guys probably poke 100 holes into this, but there's 8,760 hours in a year, right? And so if we were to kind of assume 40 hours of work for 52 weeks, or assume 10 hours a week for 52 weeks that we're going to church, assume that we're sleeping 8 hours for 365 days, you know, driving, for me, it takes me 45 minutes to drive to work, sometimes 45 minutes. So I was assuming 2 hours a day for 52 weeks or whatever, 5 days a week. Maybe I should have done 5 days a week. Maybe I did. But the percentage of time that we're spending at work is almost a quarter of our lives, right? And it's a lot of time to be outside of this building. It's a lot of time to be outside of people that we know are Christians, we know will influence us in the right direction. This leisure time, hopefully there's more than 31% that is associated with things within this Christian realm of what we're supposed to be doing, studying, looking at things. But we're sleeping a lot too. I like to sleep more than 8 hours, but I don't get to do that. Retire. I need to retire. But it's a significant part of our lives, and it's important that we recognize is that we're not just Christian when we're at home, and we're not just Christian when we're around other people that expect us to be Christian. We have to be Christian, especially at work. Any thoughts or anything as before I kind of move on? Yes. Yep, commanded.
Trying to find ways to circumvent that or to reduce it down. We have a commandment, and you know, one of the things that I feel we have a responsibility to know how we can provide best for our employer, as well as provide for being a servant of God. We are to be the best employee we can to our employer, and with that, we're to be a Christian, not a good Christian, but a Christian.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that we try not to reduce that 24% and give up on our obligations to provide.
For sure. Yeah, and I kind of struggle with that, just kind of going into work in general. It's like, you know, my first thought is not trying to, I don't know, man. It's, you know, I think it just in general, naturally, you know, we try to be good people and stuff like that. But my first thought is not to think about God and it's a flaw, you know, to think about everything that I'm doing and every action that I take, you know, should be with that mindset of the heavenly, you know, like what Daniel was talking about. And, you know, we have a higher calling. And sometimes I have trouble just focusing in on that before I go to work. And I appreciate all you guys on the Telegram that kind of do various, you know, little things in the morning to kind of help me remind myself before I get into work about those things. Kind of helps kind of path the way a little bit throughout the day. But any other thoughts? Okay, so here's the schedule. It's kind of hard to read. I thought it'd be a little bigger, but today's is just really an introduction to this idea of getting into this Christian in the workplace. To Mike's point earlier, we're going to try to build this first 3 lessons around this biblical foundation. You know, our view, the first 3 lessons will help us to recognize how we are viewing ourselves in the job. It's like, and Doug's actually going to teach this, so I don't want to say anything that may not go along with what he's going to teach. But, you know, when I think of that title, it's like, well, we should always think about working unto God and not working unto men. And a lot of times we because it's our job and it's our way of life and we have to provide for our family, we're not thinking in that mindset. And we're always thinking, it's like, how do we succeed? How do we get better? How do we make more money? How do we do all these things? And we need to recognize that we're working for God and not for men. And we'll look into God's viewpoint about our work. It's like, what does God say about it? What does God's word tell us about us being work? To John's point about we are commanded to work, to Albert's point about we need to work. And there's certain aspects of what God expects of us from our providing for our families and doing things in relation to work. It talks about the man that doesn't work doesn't eat, right? And then the viewpoint of others, working as a godly examples. To kind of round out this biblical foundations theme. It's like a lot of the comments earlier were saying that people are seeing us. There's people that are watching us. There's people that look towards our examples, and sometimes we don't know it. And so are we always showing that Christian example? The next section, issues with the pursuit and achievements of success. You know, as we begin to succeed, how do these topics, these titles, pride and competition, materialism, misplaced priorities, pride and competition, do we become prideful with this success that we've had? How is our attitude toward us being successful? Does it change as we become even better at our jobs or become more successful within our workplace? Materialism, as we begin making more money, are we buying things that make us feel like we are at this stature above everybody else? That we have all of these things? Do we become more materialistic? We'll look at a topic around that. And then all these misplaced priorities, because of this pride, because of this materialism, are we changing our priorities about our job, about who we are as Christians? Are we going in a direction that kind of feeds on those things and makes us go in a direction that we don't want to go? And the next section, issues with workplaces, adversity, and failure. You know, there's a lot of things that happen within our jobs that can make us bitter or make us have resentment against our coworkers, against things that we think we deserve, promotions or projects or whatever, you know, things that make us resent other people. How are we reacting to those people? How are we reacting to those situations? How should we act? You know, this is discouragement that also comes along with that. Some of the information within the material actually gave some interesting examples, and so there's discouragement not just within when we don't get what we want, but more about discouragement when we have to do something that almost requires us. And I guess this is the example I thought of. So I'm a manager for this for a company, and there's instances where there's times when I have to almost feel like I'm lying to people because of HR things. It's like we're making changes, and people come up and say, hey, is anything going to happen to me? And I know that something is, but I can't tell them that at that point in time. And so it's hard. It's hard to sit there and try to make them comfortable or make them feel okay, but knowing in the back of my mind that, man, something, I'm sorry, man, I can't tell you anything. And it just gives them this idea that, you know, something is bad that's going to happen. And so there's that discouragement of having to run into that scenario and run into that, you know, I guess, particular instance of having to do those things. In the final section, workplace temptations and challenges, lying and integrity, you know, corporate and peer pressure. You know, there's a lot of things that the corporation pushes on us. You know, my company is pushing all these I don't even know what to call them. Is that the first row? Okay. Pushing all these gay right type things, and I'm not trying to just focus in on that, but that was just one thing that kind of came to mind. It's like they're trying to push these things onto the whole corporation and these certain standards and certain things within that. And then not only are we having to somewhat abide or at least try to take in these things from the corporate level, but also from the people that we're just working with. Within the group of people that we see every day, there's peer pressure within that little group of people. And how do we deal with all that? And there's women in the workplace. How are we as men treating the women in our workplace? How are the women, you know, being in the workplace? How are they handling themselves in the workplace? And this actually even talks about, should women even work in the workplace? What does God say about women and parents and moms and things like that? And so we'll kind of go into that topic as well for that one. And then stress and anxiety, all of these things, all this lying and corporate peer pressure, all of these titles, all of these lessons kind of can be, I guess, summed up or can all result in this stress and anxiety for our jobs. If we feel like we're losing our job, or we feel like we're pressured at our job, or we start to feel like we can't provide for our family, it causes stress, it causes anxiety. We worry about us being successful at our jobs, and it just challenges our faith. It challenges, you know, who we are as Christians. So, any thoughts, comments? I did have a lot more, but maybe we'll just do this one real quick since it's one of the last ones. So what Bible verses come to mind when you're thinking about our jobs and what God tells us about our work? Do any Bible verses come to mind of working in the workplace? No, you can just write the verse if you can remember it. I mean, I have 3 or 4 in here that I kind of wrote up, but, you know, do any come to mind when we think about work, how we're supposed to act at work? 1 Peter 3:13 through 16. Colossians 3:23. I was going to try to read some of these, but with only a few more minutes, I'd like to just kind of see what this does as people start typing. Answers? You got multiple? I think you can put in multiple answers.
I wanted the one where he does something
Colossians 3:23, 3. Actually, I think I actually had Colossians 3:23. And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men. What else we got? 3:17. Love your enemies. Somebody put WCCL. Maybe that's a typo. 1 Timothy 5:8. Yeah. Colossians 3:23. Well, I was going to read some of these. These, take maybe note of these, and we'll probably reference a lot of these as we kind of go through the various lessons. I think for me, I had these Proverbs 16:3. Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be established. Colossians 3:23. And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and to men. I think somebody referenced that. Philippians 2:14-15, do all things without complaining and dispute, that you may become blameless and harmless children of God without fault in the midst of crooked and perverse generation. And I guess my point here is just the bell, that's the bell, is that a lot of these verses that we read, you may not associate them with the workplace right off the bat. But if you really think about them, they can be, and they are kind of referencing just us, our character, how we're reacting, and all of these things can be associated with, how we're doing with the workplace. So, thank you for your attention. Thank you for playing along. Doug will be teaching us on Wednesday.